Last one, margin of safety. The only thing is we don't know what is that margin. That's the struggle we have. We've been trying it for 25 years. Thanks a lot, and thank you so much. We'll go on to the next speaker.
Someone, Muthu was telling me he's a budding speaker. I thought these are all budding investors, investment experts. I won't even say budding speakers. They are budding investment experts. Varadha is passionate about investing in about psychology and forensics. I think if you are into forensics, you'll do a good job in investing also.
He's trying to improve his understanding of the world in a gets to go home a little smarter and he wants to go to home a little smarter every night. He writes periodically on forensics, mental modes, and on specific stocks. So you have 15 minutes to do all this, and any questions and answers for Varadha will be taken offline. Over to Varadha.
Thanks. I think that was quite an introduction to live up to. Just in case, I face some eggs and brickbats, I've just got a helmet also alongside. I think first it was ink. Yesterday someone started throwing shoes at speakers. So I thought might as well be a little more, safe. I think someone talked about margin of safety. I think the first thing is to make sure that you protect yourself. Thanks for the introduction. I have a couple of, sort of passions of mine. One is reading a lot of this detective stuff, forensics and stuff like that. And that has actually helped me quite a lot in questioning the status quo. So the other thing that I really like is satire and humor. So when this opportunity to talk about something came up, I said this is not a bad situation because, if you're a bad investor, you end up looking like a joker, which is good humor. And, hopefully if it works, someone will remember you. So, this is an earnest attempt to put in practice what Rajiv Thakkar talked about in terms of mental models. I'm just, trying to sort of mentally map out what a business could look like. We could talk about EPSs, cash flows, what the stock did, etc., etc. That isn't quite my forte, nor is it something that interests me. The speaker said before me, if you understand the business and understand what makes the business tick and what will take for the business to get uprooted, I think hopefully you will be able to see a lot more of both the challenges and the tailwinds that the business has. So, I wanted to start off slightly on a lighter note. The second one, are there businesses that can grow both the volumes and pricing at the same time, which is very counterintuitive in economics, right? Something like this, like Rajiv Thakkar said, wasn't quite thought of maybe 10, 20 years back. Now you have what is called scale and network effect. You think of Google, you think of Facebook, you think of, social media. Most social media are a winner takes all sort of game. Obviously, I think India still does not have business models like an Uber or a Facebook where you have a complete winner takes all sort of game. But I think as an economy sort of becomes a little more sophisticated, the trend becomes towards services that are purely intellectual property driven. What is intellectual property? You don't have to necessarily put in a large factory, produce goods, hire a ship, hire tankers, containers, etc., etc. You're selling, well, I think for lack of a better word, literally dreams. You have nothing really tangible to show. When you're on Facebook, it's a dream, right? There's nothing that you're going to take back home at the end of the day. Or, if you're on, for instance, if you're searching for something on Google, there's nothing. Google is probably like Charlie Munger had said, he's probably got the best moat in the world. I think they probably know more about every single individual in the world than their own respective wives. And that is saying a lot. So I think, the reason why I sort of picked on this is somewhere, I think 3-4 years back, I read this book called Imagining India by Nandan Nilekani, and he talked about the northern belt, which some people refer to as a cow belt. I'd rather not use that word. how that's going to be a big driver of job growth, consumption, and whatever else going forward. Because what essentially happened in the south in Bangalore or in Chennai in the 1990s is happening in a UP or a Rajasthan. Because the average age in the north is probably a good 10 years lower than what it is in the south. So I suspect it's probably in the region of about 23, 24. What that means is you're going to have a whole generation of people who are going to enter the workforce, start consuming for the first time. And unlike the south, the type of people that you're going to have are probably closer to a good blue collar worker, someone who works in a factory like a Hyundai or a Ford or whatever, and who has the ability to sort of build his first house, his first car, his first motorcycle, and so on and so forth. And just to sort of lend credence to the fact, if you talk to any consumer good manufacturer, including an LG or a Samsung, or talk to Maruti, a good 40-50% of their entry-level car sales would come from states like Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, UP, Bihar, and hopefully soon enough, Orissa, West Bengal, and so on and so forth. So that is essentially one big tailwind I'd sort of urge you to think about. I think I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so I mean, we all roamed around on a bicycle. Now I think within Chennai, I can't think of too many households that don't have a motorcycle, leave alone a car. So I think that's a big sort of generational shift that's happened in the last 20 years. So obviously, where people earn, they consume, they have a wife, they have kids. These all add to the consumption basket. So, and again, using another mental model, I think when the Californian gold rush happened in the 1850s or 60s or whatever, I think the guys who actually emerged with a moat, unscathed, and were able to scale up, were guys like a Levi's and people who made shovels and picks and stuff like that. Not so much the guys who dug for gold, because irrespective of who dug for gold, it seems like they had to wear a jeans, and that jeans happened to be Levi's, and hence obviously Levi's benefited greatly out of it. So that's sort of the mental model that I was trying to use, saying, irrespective of whoever consumes, which brand wins, what do they have to do, right? In this era where, Rajiv again talked about brands, you have to build a brand, right? For you to build a brand, media is an integral part of it. And for the record, I work in the media industry, so I do have some sense of what's going on. The relative size of the media industry in India, for obviously legacy reasons, for reasons of ownership, et cetera, is not even a fraction of what it is in the US. So again, I think that's essentially what I was talking about. The headway to grow is substantial. Again, why of all things, why pick a Hindi news channel? Because there are a couple of things that I would urge you to again sort of think about. Unlike the South, which has had a slightly more educated English-speaking population, the North has a lot of people who still speak Hindi. Hindi is obviously the largest language spoken. And thanks to, I think, a whole host of things that are happening in the country, the rise of Narendra Modi, rise of Kejriwal, rise of maybe, people who are now trying to genuinely, clean the system and focus on development. The amount of political activism and awareness that one is now starting to see is substantial. Cut back to, let's say, 5 years back when maybe the UPA was in power and pretty much every single state in the country had a sort of dynasty ruling it. Between that to now, if you open any Twitter, Facebook, the amount of political discussions that happen, the awareness that's happened is substantial. And obviously, I think one big offshoot of that is the fact that news channels are rapidly gaining in popularity. You may love them, you may hate them, you may have a view on them, it doesn't matter, but everyone has their own sort of way to drink from the fountain. And there are only 3 or 4 pipes that lead up from the fountain, and I believe Aaj is probably the fattest, I think, to use the exact word that he had used, the fattest with the largest network effect amongst them. I won't again bore you with details. The aim of this is not so much to talk about the company, talk about numbers, EPS, but to build mental models around it. Why does why does a good channel have network effects? Fairly intuitive for most people who obviously now know Google or a Facebook. More eyeballs means more advertisers means more eyeballs. So I think it's a sort of happy situation. That is why you will see that operating leverage in this business is substantial, because you're not selling a produce. There is no factory, there's no transportation, there's no logistics, nothing. So, and one of the things that, again, I've been sort of thinking over is, if you look at some of these businesses that have broken even, right, achieved critical mass, have low marginal cost. Again, Google, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, you can quote a whole host of examples, and have the ability to collect money upfront or within a reasonable time frame. Whose SG&A, that is, the amount of money that you have to invest into branding, marketing, etc., starts sort of going down as a proportion of sales over a period of time, you will have a tremendous sort of period of wealth creation. And that is, I think, to some tech investors, this probably may be familiar. This is called the S curve, where, if you've on an S, if you've just sort of crossed that threshold at the lower bar, then you will have a big sort of spike up, which is probably what, an Amazon has gone through in the US. Now they're at a stage where they can practically start to dismantle individual retailers, because they have the reach distribution to service every single US household. And similarly, hopefully, I think we'll probably have one or two winners emerge from here, whether it's a Flipkart or Snapdeal or Jabang or whoever it is. So I think that's to me an indication that this can potentially bulk up. You have a tailwind on the demand side. More people are being aware. They want to watch news. And news is now seen as the feeder for you to be a little more active on social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter. You read the news, you have an opinion, you post it, people engage in a constructive discussion. And obviously, that gets into a virtuous sort of cycle. TV Today network only has two channels. One is India Today Television, which for the life of me, I cannot understand why they chose to call it Headlines Today until recently, because they had such a great brand in India Today. Even now, I think you go to any of the newsstands, wherever, even in UP, Bihar, you'd still see India Today selling for 40 rupees in an era where content is practically free across all of languages. Anyway, I think mistake rectified. I think it obviously has a little bit of a positive rub-off on the brand. Again, on anchors, you may love them, you may hate them. Lots of people like some of these anchors, don't like them. But I think that's the whole purpose of that's a whole sort of USP of a well-run news channel, is to arouse emotions in you. I think some of you who probably may have seen the movie Tomorrow Never Dies would sort of attest to it. It's not the news that is important. It's the emotions that the news channel is able to arouse in you that is important. Some scuttlebutt, just as a trivia, lots of people say I was very curious to understand what does this word scuttlebutt mean. Scuttlebutt actually referred to a bar where sailors used to drink. Once they stopped at a port and they had 2-3 days to kill, and that's when they would exchange stories. And that's when you would get to know what was going on in another country, what was going on in a kingdom, was the king alive, etc., etc. So I think that sort of morphed into hearsay. I think the word still sort of goes. So that's just an interesting bit of trivia. Some stuff that we figured from various places on the web, and also by speaking to a couple of experts. Some idea of what on-ground info indicates. Again, we talked about pricing power. You can look at Aaj rates versus India TV's rates, which is probably half of it. Even though, ironically, India Today's reach would probably be 80% of it. I think that is the network effect that we're talking about. If you look at, for example, the US, just to give you the closest analogy, this is a real live example. I think when the Gulf War happened in the 90s, CNN went from practically, I don't know what, maybe a few $1 million MCAP to $4-5 billion MCAP within a space of 6-7 years. Because that was the first time that someone got to see a real war with real people with real issues live. And that probably happened in India in the Kargil war. And now, of course, I think you have this big sort of activism and awareness about political issues that is going on. Again, I think these are fairly self-explanatory for you to figure out. Why is a news channel relevant? I work in the media industry, so to some extent I do have some view as to where these become fairly helpful. These typically are extremely useful for a male-centric purchase. Things like cars, mobile phones, where the guy is engaged. Because, women obviously get engaged with soaps and household sort of issues and music and talk shows and stuff like that. Men, given the limited amount of time that they have in the household, typically the 8 to 10 night slot happens to be the most engaged part of the day, where you have a little more time to yourself. And so that's when, you have the ability to sort of advertise some of these big ticket size products. Couple of tailwinds. One, is, I'll cover the lower one first. Lower commodity prices, if you look at earnings practically over the last couple of quarters, the biggest issue has been growth. Ironically, we are in a situation where you're able to improve margins because commodity prices have come down, whereas sales growth is quite a challenge. And you will see a lot of commentary from most FMCG firms or Maruti saying that they are plowing back all of this into advertising, SG&A and improved brand promotion to drive margins. Digitization, I won't touch on it in the interest of time. I talked about the second laddu. Hopefully this is the third laddu. I think you have a whole host of elections that are coming up. And just an analysis of few things. I think from the looks of it, it seems like because they just have 2 channels, they focused on profitability. It's a well-run business. It's not run by someone who wants to build an empire. There have been a few mistakes on capital allocation. I think they got into FM again without understanding the network effect. They got into a suboptimal newspaper called Mail Today, which is circulated only in Delhi. Again, the good news is that they've cut losses. They moved on with it. There is no more investment into this. This is pretty much the runway ahead. The US industry, even adjusting for PPP, is about a magnitude difference in terms of size. Financials, again, I think I leave it to all of you to sort of figure this out. But whenever a business goes through a curve of ROE and ROCE increasing, you make a lot of money. I still think this is reasonably undervalued when compared to the peers. And there could be sort of potential upsides if FDI gets opened up on the news channel, on the news media. So I'll stop at this. And anything, we can discuss this offline.
Thank you, Varadharajan. And please hold him. He'll be there for the whole day, and you can track him for his views. I next invite Mr.